Hi, okay, so we have some animated text here. So if I just move this playhead, you'll notice the text just goes over the glass of wine. We've applied some easing, so the text gradually builds up some momentum and then decreases. What we're going to do as well, just to help finish that composite off now, okay, is we're going to add a couple more things. One of those is we're going to add some motion blur, because on a computer what you'll find is actually the images are generally pretty sharp regardless of wherever you may be. Whichever frame we go to, the edges will always be sharp because it's not recording through a shutter. But obviously video itself generally features motion blur, and so it's nice to sort of mimic that with our graphics in order to, like I said, create a better composite, make all the elements feel like they were recorded together on the same camera in a sense. And it's quite easy to add motion blur. You do have the ability to add it via effects if you want to. It gives you a little bit more control, but in this case all I'm going to do is just tick the tab underneath the motion blur icon, which is that little sort of ball that appears to be bouncing, leaving a trail behind it. And you'll notice that's something you can add on for any additional layers. So you can actually add it to a whole bunch of layers if you've got a lot of motion by just going through and switching it on for each one. There's no point switching it on at the bottom layer because this layer here is the actual video clip itself. It's got no movement in it in the software. However, the text has got movement. I've animated that across. Now you'll notice even though I've turned it on, nothing's happening. It doesn't look any different to how it did when it was off. And the reason for that is that up here you've got these other switches, and you've got one that says enables motion blur, and so that's actually set to off. So when you render out, you will get motion blur. These buttons are generally dealing with playback or what we're doing right now in the software. So, and I'm assuming really with that the reason they've switched off is because it just eats up extra processing power which you could be using somewhere else, or graphics power. So if I turn that on, you'll notice straight away we've got a blurry text now, and we've got motion blur, and you'll see that as it comes to stop, as it starts to slow down as well, the blur lessens. So it's based on how fast that text is actually moving. So like I said, by just adding that, we start to composite it a lot better. It just suits the video better than it did before. It was just too sharp and crisp when it was moving. So that's one nice thing we can do. One last thing we're going to do as well is we're going to just apply a effect in order to make it appear as though the text isn't just on top of the glass, but it's actually sort of going around it a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply an effect called bulge, and if you're not sure where it is, so you can see this was actually in the distort panel. I couldn't remember where it was, but it doesn't really matter because I can just type in the name and it will find it for me. I'm going to drag that effect and apply that to the glass. Okay, and you sorry, not the wine glass text. Okay, the reason I'm not applying it to the video, because if I apply it to the video, it will bend the video. I don't want to bend the video, I want to bend the text, and you'll notice now, in fact, let's just stretch that a little bit to make it bigger. You can see as it goes over the text, it does indeed warp it. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of controls here in regards to its radius. So you can see we can change just its horizontal radius or its vertical radius. Okay, we can even change the center point of where that bulge actually starts, and also the height. So how much, you know, whether we want to pull it back or out. Okay, but what I'm going to do is actually I'm not going to bother changing the horizontal and vertical radius numerically here, because I want to change it visually. What I want to do, you'll see it has no effect on the glass because it's not on the glass layer, it's on the text layer. What I want to do with this bulge is to get it to match the shape of the glass. So in fact, okay, there we go. So I'll do it here instead visually. It's a lot easier. And then what should happen is as the text goes around, the bulge creates that effect again of warping the text, but because now it's warping as it's going along the glass, it gives us that feeling of that it's because the text is actually wrapping around the glass, which isn't really the case. So yeah, so a couple of additional effects have just turned some text movement, which is generally quite basic, into something that looks a lot better. Okay, and in fact, if anything, I've got the text quite low down, and because it's quite dark, you're not seeing the effect as well as you could. So what I would say is I could really just move, if we just go to there, I could just move that up a little bit as well. Hopefully then that should look a lot nicer too. Okay, there we go, we get to see the effect a little bit more.